Greetings, and welcome to this webinar presentation on Rosacrucianism from 1614 to the 20th century. In this talk, I will overview the original Rosicrucian manifestos, published in 1614 to 1616, the 1700s occult groups, especially those of the French Revival, and finally, the Rosicrucian manifestation in the Golden Dawn's Rose Rube et Ore Crucis. I would like to preamble this talk by making very clear that the opinions and perspectives presented in this talk are purely those of myself, the presenter, Paul Edward Rana. They do not reflect any Masonic body, Grand Lodge, Lodge, or Scottish Rite body, but are purely my own experience based on the last decade of working with various Rosicrucian groups, occult and otherwise, and my researches into their works. So with that, let us begin. I'd like to give everyone attending some brand new information they might not have ever heard before. Maybe pique your interest to study a little deeper into the varied aspects of Rosicrucianism and its many branches. Before we enter upon any great and laudable undertaking, we should first invoke the aid of deity. So we'll begin with a Rosicrucian prayer from the 1600s. O Lord, from thine hand cometh all good, all grace, and all blessing. The characters of nature as thou trace with thy fingers, but none can read them, less he hath been taught in thy school. O Lord our God, who shall not extol thee? O Lord of the universe, who should not praise thee? O Lord, who shall not know thee? All is from thee, all is of thee. Into thee must all again re-enter. Thou art Lord alone, and there is none beside thee. O Lord of the universe, whose dwelling is heaven without, whose temple is the heart within. O God, the vast and the mighty one, thou art in all things, and all things art in thee. O thou self of nothing. For what else can I call thee? In myself, I am nothing but self. In thee, I am the self of nothing. Live thou in me, and bring me to that self which is in thee. Amen. So tonight we're going to explore, hopefully, a little bit of what that prayer means and how Rosicrucianism has evolved throughout the ages. These are, in brief, some of the key Rosicrucian or Rosicrucian-esque organizations we're going to touch on tonight. Here's maybe a little prettier version. Specifically, some German branches, some French branches, and some English branches. Now, English, that just meant English speaking. Not all of these are necessarily English proper. We're going to begin with reviewing the original 1614 to 1616 manifestos, the Golden Rosenkreuz of the 1700s, a Masonic alchemical order. We'll jump into the French mysteries with the Société des Philosophes Inconnus of 1643. We'll touch very briefly upon Pasquale's Eloquent and specifically his Rocroi. We'll touch briefly upon Willermose's CBCS and specifically how they utilized some Rosicrucian symbols. We'll touch briefly upon the Order of the Royal Secret, which eventually became the parent, essentially, of the modern, ancient, and accepted Scottish Rite. Then we'll dive into the higher French mysteries of Rosicrucianism, the more occult branches known as the Frères d'Orient, the Rose-Croix d'Orient, the ECECIA, and we're actually not going to touch on the EGCA today. There's not enough time. And we're going to finalize in the English by diving into the SRIA, the Masonic Rosicrucian Society, as it's commonly called in English, and its manifestations of the RR at AC. So beginning with the original Rosicrucian manifestos, that should say 1614 to 1616, like on the bottom. Let's give you a little bit of a background on where this came from. The Renaissance, that tumultuous period that led Europe from the Dark Ages into the era of Enlightenment, meant an awakening for mankind who began to realize its potential by mirroring themselves in the splendor and magnificence of the universe. The scriptures from the older traditions, which the dogmatic church had sought to extinguish, were rediscovered, namely the Nag Hammadi, namely many translated and published, such as Plato's works, various alchemical works, and especially the Corpus Hermeticum. Thus, the lore of the wise was recovered from lost times, which greatly influenced esotericists, philosophers, artists, and scientists, as well as the Christian religion in general. However, it was also a very anxious time politically when Giordano Bruno in the year 1600 was burned at the stake in Rome after having advocated that the Hermetic writing should be equated with the Bible. Galileo Galilei faced the court of the Inquisition 30 years later and had to abjure, quote, the wrong doctrine, that the earth revolved around the sun, thereby saving his life, but still placed in house arrest for the remainder of his living days. The Reformation of Luther split Europe's millennia of Christian theological belief in two, and much of the mystical aspect was no doubt lost as the Protestant church developed its form and content. The conflict between the Catholics and Protestants eventually resulted in the 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648. It is therefore no exaggeration to say at the time was challenging for the individual as well as the old authorities and society at large. Many were convinced that they lived at the threshold of the end of time, the apocalypse was imminent. Consequently, people were searching for divine signs as guidance, whether through prophets or astronomical events, such as the ominous comet of 1572, and the two new stars that appeared in the constellations Cygnus and Serpentarius in the year 1604. Thus is roughly the soil from which the Rosicrucian manifestos were manifested. The Fama and the Confessio are two works proclaiming that a secret society had appeared with the task of purifying religion, working towards an internal reformation of the Protestant Church, encouraging learning, promoting science, and promoting alleviation of all human suffering. The Fama thus thought to inspire those who were already awake, and to awaken the sleeping, and challenge the self-righteous. While the Confessio announced the reasons why the Rosicrucian order would now open their doors to all who considered themselves to be ready. Therefore, the manifestos spread intensive hopes of a new era, a century of bliss of the Holy Spirit. This would be created by a general cultural reformation involving both religion and society, and the renewal of all arts and sciences. That work, as we know, is not yet fully completed. As supposed perpetuators of the Rosicrucian traditions, we should still be adhering to these principles laid out in the manifestos, and those are some of the core principles we're going to explore today, so that we can reignite in both the microcosm and the macrocosm the conjoined symbol of the rose and the cross. So the Fama Fraternitatis was published anonymously in Kassel, Hesse-Kassel, Germany, in 1614. It was a discovery of the fraternity of the most laudable order of the Rose Cross. Most likely it was written by the Tübingen Circle and Johann Valentin André, but you could spend an entire thesis just on that one subject. So we're going to just briefly overview that history and go into some of the meanings of what it is about. So to the wise and understanding reader, I did not put a picture there for you. It opens with this amazing amazing preface. Wisdom, says Solomon, is to a man an infinite treasure, for she is the breath of the power of God, and a pure influence that flows from the glory of the Almighty. She is the brightness of the eternal light, and an undefiled mirror of the majesty of God, an image of his goodness. So obviously there's a theosophical, Sophianic aspect to Rosicrucianism from the very first lines in the preface. She teaches us soberness and prudence, righteousness and strength. She understands the subtlety of words, solutions of dark sentences. She foreknows sights and wonders, and what shall happen in time to come. With this treasure was our first father Adam fully imbued. Hence it does appear that after God had brought before him all the creatures of the field and the fowls under heaven, he gave every one of them their proper names according to their nature. The Fama goes on to begin to explain the secret tradition of the West, of the esoteric tradition, the secret mythology of the fall of man, and how man can again come back to that knowledge. It talks about this specifically through the journey of Father C.R., later referred to as CRC, Christian Rosenkreuz, in his pilgrimage to Jerusalem. His subsequent tutelage by the secret sages of the East, the wise men of Damcar in Arabia, from whom he learned supposedly the ancient esoteric knowledge, which included the study of physics, mathematics, magic, Kabbalah, and alchemy. He returned through Egypt and Fez, and his presence among the Alumbrados in Spain. It is thought in most occult circles that Rosenkreuz's pilgrimage refers to the transmutation steps of the alchemical great work. Upon his return to Germany, Father C.R. and his brothers established a secret, esoteric Christian fraternity, the Fraternity of the Rose Cross. The brothers of the fraternity were sent in mission throughout the world, having as their first priority to use the esoteric knowledge to cure the sick free of charge, gratis, to not wear any special clothing or habit, and to meet once a year in the house of the Holy Spirit. There are, right away from the beginning of the manifestos, overt themes of mystical Christianity, theosophy, Pythagorean and Kabbalistic number symbolism, alchemical processes of transmutation, and occult or magical knowledge and abilities, all passed down through the secret, invisible Fraternity of the Rose Cross. These original brethren came to 6 points of agreement. Number 1, to profess none other than to heal the sick, and that gratis, free. Obviously, Masonic orders do a great job of that in the sense of our hospitals, specifically the children's hospitals, where we literally heal the physically sick and physically ailed free. You'll come to see throughout this presentation other organizations that took this more as a spiritual interpretation and used anything from alchemy to heal the self, then to heal others, to theurgical prayers to heal self and others as well, and other magical operations to try to heal the world. Number 2, to conform to the customs of the country in which you reside. This is another aspect in which Masonry does a fantastic job of upholding the core agreements, in the sense that Masonry is very different wherever it goes. It stands by its landmarks, but it is able to adapt and evolve and fit into the country in which it resides. You can have a Quran, an Old Testament, a New Testament, a Torah, etc., upon that altar, depending on where you reside. Number 3, they meet yearly on the day of C. This is the day of Corpus Christi, at the house of Spiritus Sancti, the house of the Holy Spirit, or to write the cause of your absence. Number 4, to seek a worthy successor. And you see that this becomes very important in many esoteric orders, in which sometimes your only obligation is to find a worthy successor. Number 5, the word CR should be your seal, mark, and character. It's not just a mythological individual, it is a title, and it is an aspiration. This Christian Rosenkreuz is something to aspire to. And lastly, that the fraternity should remain secret 100 years or 120 years. It's quite interesting to note that the first manifestos were published 1614 to 1616, with some private versions circulated as early as 1610. But 1616, right? What happened 100 years later? 101 years later, we have the unification of UGLE, right? So we're going to talk briefly about the Fraternitatis, give you some background on the original Rosicrucian symbols. That way we can have some context for the various organizations we're going to talk about. Then we're going to return back to the Fama and show how one group does an especially good job of manifesting its symbolism. Yes, the oath is quite similar to that of the Sworn Book of Honorius, which was highly utilized in many of these Rosicrucian orders as well, including the Elocoan. Yes, and 120 is one of the key Rosicrucian numbers that should definitely be studied on a Kabbalistic gematria level. It also forms the password of some very important degrees in the Western esoteric tradition. So we're going to explore how some of these orders use those core teachings of Rosicrucianism: magic, alchemy, etc., etc. After 3 rows of successors, the Fama narrates the rediscovery of the vault, which should be opened after 120 years. It is composed of a vault of 7 sides. And there on the left, you see a diagram from, I believe that's J. Augustus Knapp from Manly P. Hall's Secret Teachings of All Ages. It's pretty veiled. You see a secret door in a wall. You see brethren astounding and dropping to their knees in prayer. You see a circular altar with a divine ray of white light coming down from the center into the center of that altar. And that's about it. That's all they really give. We're going to come to see how some orders manifested the Rosicrucian temple of the Fama more specifically in other traditions. It is said in this that every side or wall had a door for a chest wherein there lay diverse things, especially all our books. That if it should happen after many 100 years, the order or fraternity should come to nothing. They might, by this only vault, be restored again. So let's explore how, very briefly, here's another image of the vault. This is from a modern book. I wasn't able to find the artist's name, so I can't credit it, unfortunately. But this one gets a little more in depth. You see the hidden doors for the books. You see the 7 sides and the 7 seals on the floor, the universal circle in the center. It's a decent representation. In this vault, they find the tomb of Christian Rosenkreuz, and they truly established the order at this point. And this is when the Fama and the Confessio were written to commemorate their rediscovery of this vault that had been lost. The second text, 1615, the Confessio Fraternitatis, the Confession of the Laudable Fraternity of the Most Honorable Order of the Rose Cross, written to all the learned of Europe, was also published anonymously in Hesse-Kassel. It took more of a political angle against the tyrannical church, and it even actually talks about Islam, specifically by mentioning the name Mahomet. It affirms the validity and truth of the Fama and expands upon it. It's definitely not quite as groundbreaking as the Fama, but it is part and parcel, and generally they were published together, the Fama and the Confessio, with that preface as well. Last of the main Rosicrucian manifestos is the Chemical Wedding of Christian Rosenkreuz. We could spend an entire seminar just talking about this insane story, which is kind of like the original Alice in Wonderland. It's like an acid trip. It's supposed to be a story of Christian Rosenkreuz from the year 1459, and the story of this pious old man, hermit, who receives one day a letter that flies in his window, and you see this angel pops out and a trumpet, and it announces he's invited to a royal wedding. And he takes this journey to go to this royal wedding. When he comes to the wedding, he is the only one that is a poor beggar almost. Most of the other attendees are full of pomp and circumstance, and the learned, the educated, the royal. First thing that happens when he gets to the wedding, the king and queen are killed. The king and queen who are supposed to be married. Their bodies are melted down. They start going through an alchemical transformation. A lot of crazy stuff happens. In the middle, there's an image of the attendees having to go through this process of their own alchemical transformation. And long story short, in general, Christian Rosenkreuz, is the only one worthy to discover the true secret. And he discovers the vault, the very vault that they talked about, or a prototype of that vault, in which he discovers Venus, Sophia naked, Our Lady Alchemia of 7 letters. And he is given the true secret of immortality. He is the one that is supposed to hold this and perpetuate this. And he is the one that discovers the transmutation of the king and queen as they are resurrected, and sees them sailing off in their 12 ships under the sign of Libra. That is your 80-second breakdown of the Chemical Wedding. It is one of the coolest things you could read, and it's really short. Check it out, get into it. We could do an entire thing just on that someday. But we're just doing this to preface and get into the manifestations of Rosicrucianism. So let's talk a little bit about some of the various groups that sprang out of this. So we have all this. Rosicrucianism is one of those big terms we hear all the time in occultism, right? In occultism, in Freemasonry, in the Western esoteric tradition. There's a lot of flack out there about it. There's a lot of fairy tales. There's a lot of interesting stories. I would like tonight to go through some of the more important and major historical manifestations of the RC tradition. And to be clear when we're talking myth, be clear when we're talking fact. And perhaps open our minds to some manifestations of it that we weren't aware of. Okay? One of those first manifestations, as early as 1643, was known as the Société des Philosophes Inconnus. And this group, that means the Society of the Unknown Philosophers. This is a copy of their original statutes, as published by Michael Meyer. It was probably written by Sendivogius in 1643. And we see that their seal on the right is that of a trident. So a Poseidian trident within a Vesica Pisces. And this order especially upheld ideals of the Rosicrucian tradition in the sense of maintaining a complete anonymity and truly being unknown, being an order existing in secret without any interest of financial gain. This group, their statutes were first published in 1691 by Sendivogius. Robert Ambalan, in his text Lamartinism, says that this group claims to come out of, quote, the Brothers of the East. Give me 1 second. I'm checking my screen real quick. Okay. Claims to come out of the Brothers of the East. And we're going to see how that term gets conflated a whole bunch. In French, because this is written in French, it's Frères d'Orient, Brothers of the East. An initiatic order claiming to be constituted in Constantinople in 1090 under the patronage of Emperor Alexis Comnenus, a secret mystic fraternity grouped together the adepts of the Rosicrucian school of the evangelical and Protestant types. This order was that of the unknown philosophers. Ambalan gives a genealogical tree of lineage of this group, beginning with Henry Coenrath, who is famous for his amphitheatrum and his alchemical texts, Henry Soton, Sendivogius the alchemist, Jakob Boehme, the Teutonic philosopher and the master of theosophy, Rudolf Salzmann, who is a member of the Strict Observance, as well as Pasquale's Rite of the Elocoen, and he also worked together with Saint Martin and Willermoes to form the Rectified Scottish Rite and CBCS. And finally, Louis Claude de Saint Martin, who is said to be initiated July 4th, 1790. So within this, you see that Ambalan, and again, this is the genealogical tree that these writers give in the Martin's tradition. I attribute it more as a mythological history rather than a literal history. Even though they give a tree, doesn't mean that it's necessarily true. It could be there to give credence to a tradition and make it seem older than it really is. But those teachings and those ideas are explored deeper within that organization and its initiations, within the initiations of the Frères d'Orient specifically. So the statutes were again published in 1784 in L'Étoile Flamboyante by a baron. And Robert Ambalan claims direct lineage to this order. Note as well, one of the things about the Rosicrucian tradition is noting their sigils and seals. And you can note the similarity between this seal and Pasquale's Elocoen sigils, and also that of the Agala Society, another society that claims to have descendants from the original Rosicrucians and claimed descendants from Martinez de Pasquale. If you're not quite as familiar with some of those things, then maybe hit up some of my other videos. I have about 30 hours of content on Pasquale and the Elocoen and the Martin's tradition on my YouTube as well. Steve Adams said he just finished producing an edition of the Green Book of the EC, Livre Vert, and the Registry of 2,400 Names. That's awesome. I'd love to talk to you more about that. Yeah. I published a version about 3 years ago with that had both Louis Claude de Saint Martin's handwritten version, as well as that of Prunel de Lire, and combine those together with, I think, the first time someone's truly explained how to use the book and how it's used in the Elocoen initiations and rituals. So let's keep going on. So that is one major group. We see this term philosophe inconnu permeate the Western esoteric tradition from here on out. even though this specific 1643 group, there's very little known about them besides these articles and stat sheets. That is credible, at least. The next major order is the German Gold- und Rosenkreuz. This can be spelled in so many different ways, and I do not know German, so I'm going to spell it for you every different way there is. These documents here come from the archives of the Sodalitas Rosacrucis at Sola Salatae, who likely in turn received them from the Grand Lodge of Sweden in Stockholm. The Order of the Golden Rosenkreuz claimed a direct or indirect linear succession to the original Rosicrucians, and they highlighted specifically the role of alchemy and magic. They sought to reestablish the society of the Rosicrucian manifestos. In their there's a couple different versions of this, but the version we're talking about really manifested around 1767. In that Reformation, they established the titles in the order of the 9 Rosicrucian grades, which we'll get to in a moment, which have since been used by many Rosicrucian groups. The purpose of this order was to regenerate man back to his original dignity, to learn the secrets of nature, and restore the image of God. The members had to study and work diligently with laboratory alchemy before magical and theurgical work was allowed to commence in the higher grades. In their 9th degree, that of Magus, the secrets of life and death were conveyed, which in theory should enable the creation of life and the overcoming of death. They believed, like Baron von Hundt's strict observance, in secret chiefs who would eventually come and provide the most sublime alchemical and theurgical secrets. At least a couple high-ranking lodge masters were deceived by people claiming to be such chiefs. And that excerpt comes directly from the SRC at SSA. As Christopher McIntosh writes, so on the left, that is an image from the Secret Figures of the Rosicrucians, the Mysteria Magnum Universale, and that is specifically a handwritten copy. I think that one is directly by Duke Charles of Hesse, who became King Charles XIII of Sweden and Grand Master of the Swedish Rite and a bunch of other stuff. On the right, you can obviously see an alchemical interpretation of the Masonic symbols. On the left, this comes from the Golden Rosenkreuz as well, same archives. On the left, you have an image of the Tree of Life in a circular form of 2 pentagrams, one above, one below. From the highest wisdom comes cognition of eternity and time. Long life is at her right hand, to her left are riches and honor. On the right, you see an image of a lodge, and I'm going to leave it to you to try to figure out what they're doing in that diagram. Yes, he has some amazing things in those Grand Lodge archives, and we're blessed that Tommy Westland has received authorization to publish publicly his translation of Magi Divina, which has been done for 5 years. But because of various reasons, it has not been published. So that should be seeing the light of day in 2020. And that is the Golden Rosenkreuz's version of the Abramelin operation, which takes on a more alchemical and Christian interpretation. As Christopher McIntosh describes in his book on the Rosicrucians, specifically History, Mythology, and Rituals, quote, apart from the pursuit of alchemical knowledge, another important characteristic drew people to the new Rosicrucian order, namely its political stance. Rosicrucianism in the late 18th century became a rallying point for those who were of conservative outlook and who were opposed to the socially radical, rationalistic, and even anti-religious tendencies which were becoming a serious challenge in Germany. Not only in Germany, but all over Europe. We see this same milieu occurring in France with the Enlightenment era and the rising of the so-called rational and modern science, to which Pasquale's Elo Cohen reacted and gave people a more magical, spiritual interpretation of the universe. And I would dare say that our modern society is in a very similar stance, where atheism is on the rise and belief in materialism and science as the only way to knowledge is on the rise. And I think that is part of the reason why we're seeing a resurrection of the esoteric within Masonry and esoteric societies. But that's probably another subject. This Order of the Golden Rosenkreuz, there's 3 different spellings of it. Again, I don't speak German, so giving you 3 different ways I've seen it spelled. They were one of the first to use a 9 or 10 degree system using the Tree of Life of the Kabbalah. Beginning at the bottom, Junioris in Malkut, 2-9 Theoreticus, 3rd degree Practicus, 4th degree Philosophus, Adeptus Minor, Adeptus Major, Adeptus Exemptus, Magister, and Magus. On the right, that's an original manuscript from the Gurk with their mystical numbers, the title of the grade, secret numbers of the degree, symbols of the degree, mystical titles, sigils, etc., etc. And if you are a member of the SRIA or the SRICF in America, not in America, but the way it's supposed to be, or of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, you are quite familiar with those mystic numbers and symbols, as a lot of that comes directly from the Golden Rosenkreuz. So this is one of the major organizations that brought alchemy into mainstream Freemasonry, brought ceremonial magic into mainstream Freemasonry. It had a very strong heyday. It had a lot of kings involved. There were women involved too. It was totally normal back then. Same with the Asiatic Brethren and the Yellow Cohen and even the CBCS. So they had their heyday up until, say, about 1792. And then the French Revolution occurs, and most of these societies go underground. However, as you'll see published soon in the Magi Divina of Duke Charles, you'll see that those groups didn't die, they just changed their name. And there's an organization that's been passed down in Sweden ever since. This is another diagram from the Gurk, the Arcana Arcanorum, the secret of secrets. Through their alchemical transmutations, they claim to be able to bestow with guarantee that their individuals and members would come to the knowledge of the secret of secrets, the royal secret, the philosopher's stone, that secret which dissolves and unites all mysteries of heaven and of earth and gives one the knowledge of all things of heaven, of hell, and of earth. One of their key operations involved the opening of the 7 seals. And we're going to see this come up again and again in the Rosicrucian tradition. We see this symbol over there on the right of the Lamb, the Book of the 7 Seals, within the strict observance. We see it within the 4th degree Scottish Master of St. Andrew of Willermose's Rite Equise Rectifié, the Scottish Rectified Rite. We see it worked in an alchemical fashion in the Golden Rosenkreuz. And we see it worked in a magical, theurgical fashion. Theurgical fashion in the Knights of the Holy Saints John. Not the Masonic version you're familiar with, but the French version of Issa Isia, which we'll talk about later. I didn't create a slide on this. I'm just going to skip over him. We talked about him a little bit. We're going to touch really briefly on the Yellow Cohen, only because their highest degree of Ro Qua is often confused with Rose Qua or Rosicrucian. Ro Qua means the red cross. It has multiple meanings, the Ro. The red can mean, Ro can mean red. It can mean rose as well. It specifically refers here to the red Adam, the red Adamic earth, the red atom, the red earth that Adam was formed of in the beginning. Therefore, there is an alchemical tinge to it, and there's definitely a Rosicrucian angle to the Yellow Cohen, though it is more of an Old Testament theurgical order rather than a purely modern Rosicrucian order. Nonetheless, they carried many of the same tenets and principles, especially their key in on Jesus Christ. One moment. Another order that we see, we're going to touch again just for 1 minute probably, is Willermose's CBCS, the Beneficent Knights of the Holy City. Most people say this is not a Templar order, that it was a rectification of the strict observance, and they did away with the Templar myth. But that's obviously not true if you've even cursorily read their rituals. They may have said on paper they're doing with the Templar concept, but it's obviously entirely there. And they worked through 3 systems. The outer blue masonry you're familiar with, which was capstoned by the green masonry of Scottish Master. a secret inner order of white masonry, which is a squire and then a knight, and a secret inner order of the double secret class, profession, and then the grand professed. Those are essentially, yeah, right. Those are, yeah, the deer. But hey, there's something going on in there. There is a royal secret thing occurring by someone doing that when it's fully understood what they're doing, as far as slaying the old king. The double secret class was essentially an ordination into the higher mysteries. And we've proven without a doubt that in their highest degrees, they were working the Elocoen. This is obvious by reading 30 years of letters between Prince Charles of Hesse-Cassel and Jean-Baptiste Willermoz, in which he specifically says, I'm initiating the Elocoen, and in the 1790s, far after the order was supposed to have been dissolved. Here are two obvious examples of the Rosicrucian tradition being passed on in the CBCS. The symbol on the left of the pelican, or of the phoenix, rising from the ashes, whose motto in this order was honor is indestructible. And the symbol of the pelican on the right, which we see in the modern-day Scottish Rite. We see on the flag of New Orleans as well. It is the pelican feeding its young. Insurientes nutrit, he feeds the hungry, is its motto given in that order. The initiation of the sixth degree says that the fifth degree says this very ancient emblem was adopted by the order to remind us that it has always been devoted to charity and beneficence towards men of whatever religion or nation they may be. Another way in which the CBCS truly manifested the Rosicrucian ideal is through its knightly code. And this is a paraphrase, this is a nice shortened, condensed version, because the ritual is really friggin' long. Defend the weak, be generous and give freely to those in need, wipe the tears of the unhappy, and if possible, remove their source. Comfort the widow and the orphan, be a father to the lonely and defenseless children, find a worthy living for those who have gone astray. To work, show discretion and obedience, to sacrifice time and resources when this is demanded to our order's ideals, and to support all fellow travelers in need. So just a brief explanation of how this Masonic branch, which still exists as a Masonic order in most parts of the world. Unfortunately, in America, it is very rare to get invited to the Masonic branches of this. It has never reached its full capacity. It's essentially a past Grand Masters Club these days. And they don't even practice the highest degrees, and they don't do any theurgy whatsoever. So that's fun. Yeah. Oh, dude, you just did the sign of Texas. Yes, sir. And that's why Martinist rites transmit that degree all over the world. Last part of the Masonic orders we're going to talk about briefly is the Ordre du Royal Secret, specifically the Bibliothèque Nationale de France's Baylat FM 415 manuscript. It's got a lot of different names there on the left. We used to think the Franken manuscript was the oldest version of the Scottish Rite degrees. Well, here's an older version. Most likely comes from the entourage of Etienne Morin, if not himself. And on the right, that is from the manuscript. It is the oldest known drawing of the encampment of the princes, the royal secret. I've recently here. It is composed of it actually has 27 degrees, but it's got the 25 degrees of the Order of the Royal Secret, and you can see I bolded some of the more Rosicrucian-esque degrees. Namely what became our Prince of Jerusalem, what became our Rose Croix degree, what became our Knight of the Sun degree. Primitive versions of those. I believe that De Hoyos and Wages are working on a full English translation of that. But to be honest, the rituals are, and I think Steve Adams is as well, but the rituals are pretty darn close to the Franken manuscript. It's basically the French source of the Franken. But what's unique about it are the Elocoen portions in the back that no one seems to ever want to talk about. There's, for some reason, every time I see an article on the Baylat manuscript, everyone just doesn't want to talk about how there's magical rituals in the back. They are incomplete primitive versions of the first and second degree catechisms of Pasquale's Elocoen. There's also a formula for incense that uses poppy, which would get you very high and definitely help you have visions. There's a great letter from Pasquale basically condemning Freemasonry, that it's lost his way. And we have these signatures of Pasquale in a magical circle. If you're interested in this, I've already published this about 2-3 years ago. I published the Elocoan version. I was only interested in the Elocoan section, to be honest. Translated that about 3 years ago. I released it privately. But since there's so much being released right now, we might as well just publish it publicly soon. So we'll either do that through Scottish Rite Journal or just publish it publicly on our own. So just showing how this eventually filtered down to create the modern Scottish Rite. So there's this lineage going from Baron von Hunt to Willard Moses CBCS, down to here, through the Caribbean, eventually up through Louisiana to Charleston, to the Scottish Rite we know today. Now let's get into some of the meaty stuff. All of that people are probably somewhat familiar with. We're going to jump into some things people might not have ever heard about. Or at least things that there's not a lot of information out there. These are the French currents of Rosicrucianism, namely the Order Kabbalistique de la Rose-Croix on the right, or on the far left, the Frères d'Orient, the Rose-Croix d'Orient, and the Issy-Issia. These are all independent French traditions that were created. They're not Masonic. They have always been open to both men and women, though they were founded generally by people who are involved in high-grade masonry, just like most of the orders we talked about earlier. We're going to jump into these fairly quickly. The Order Kabbalistique de la Rose-Croix was founded in the late 1800s, about the same time as the Golden Dawn, as the Order Martiniste, as a part of the French Gnostic and occult revival. It gave you really cool grade titles, like Bachelor of Kabbalah, Master of Kabbalah, Doctor of Kabbalah. But in all honesty, the degrees of this order are really not anything amazing. What is amazing is that it really did revive the French Rosicrucian tradition, and it helped to bring together occultism that had been veiled and hidden for hundreds of years. It wasn't really until the late 1800s these things became more public and left the royalty and left right, yeah, and left the elect circles and started becoming available more to the bourgeoisie and more available to the middle class and to regular individuals who are interested in occultism and Rosicrucianism. Depending on what version of this organization you're talking, it was more of a study group with very simple Masonic-esque initiations bringing you into the Rosicrucian tradition. Of key note is their symbol, though. We have that symbol of Yeshua, Yud He Vav He, with the shin in the center. We see it again and again. We have that cross of Yeshua. We have the pentagram of Yeshua. Pentagram is a symbol of the microcosm and of the perfected man. And in the four corners of the cross, we have the four roses. We see the symbol again brought together again and again whenever we see the rose cross from the 1300s and on. And it's more fully expressed in the Golden Dawn Rose Cross. When Robert Ombelon revised the system of the OKRC, he capstoned the OKRC with the fourth degree of the Rose-Croix d'Orient, the Rosicrucians of the East. This order specifically was made to act as a sort of etheric link, if you will, to the Rosicrucians of the 1600s. As an etheric link, I mean that the initiation is so utterly simple. It's less of an initiation, more of an ordination. And it's really more of a being brought into an egregore, into a stream, into a current, into a lineage. This lineage is said to extend back through Martinez de Pasquale, back to the original Rosicrucians, back to the 1000s. It has all kinds of different lines and claims to it that are most likely mythological, because we never hear about the Rose-Croix d'Orient until the late 1800s. So most likely it is a modern organization. However, it upholds beautiful expressions of the Rosicrucian tradition in one of my favorite ways because of its focus on inner development, its focus on linking spiritually to these past masters of the Rosicrucian tradition, its focus on healing the sick pro bono, gratis, unknown, from a distance, or in person. And it does this primarily through a series of healing prayers and operations. There's quite a bit that's out there in English on this organization, but you're only going to find the post-1945 versions out there. The stuff from Robert Amblon. There's also some Greek versions. Whoops, sorry. There's also a Greek version out there of one of their sacramentaries, but unfortunately that version's been highly edited and they don't tell you when they inserted things. Yeah, some people might recognize this as an Eloquent operative cloth. Robert Amblon utilized it in his Rosacrucismo d'Orient as the circle you would use when you were doing healing rituals or prayers for yourself, your friend, your neighbor, your family, or a complete stranger. A quote from the transmission ceremony. My brother or sister, you've seen that we did not ask any oath of you. Indeed, you alone are responsible before God, and your conscience alone will guide your actions. Go, my brother or sister, and relieve the evils of the world. There's some really amazing prayers that are utilized in this organization, both theurgical and thaumaturgical. And with this strange time that we're living in right now, me and a bunch of my friends and fellow esotericists around the world are gathering every day at 9 p.m. UTC, Universal Time. That is 4 p.m. CDT, 4 p.m. Texas time, just for a very simple prayer. If you're a member of one of these organizations, you might have a specific praxis to do to open it up. If not, there are publications out there with prayers you can use to utilize and tap into the egregore. Or you can just do your own inspired prayer, or just meditate and send light, life, and healing to the world right now, which really needs some light and some encouragement and some positivity. If you're interested in joining me and some of my friends in this daily universal prayer, jump on at 9 p.m. UTC. Shoot me an email if you want to do some specific prayers. Every day I'm posting a different prayer that we're doing as a group, but you can do whatever you want. The idea is that manifesting the Rosicrucian ideal of healing and of beneficence and giving in an unknown manner, gratis. So that is the Rosacrucismo d'Orient. I'm going to keep speeding it up because I've got a lot more I want to get through, and I don't want to keep you all here till 10. One of the next major organizations of the French tradition is the Frères d'Orient, the FDO. This group, again, claims to have descendants back to the 1000s. There's a lot of different versions of their history out there. Many people have written multiple theses on just that. One of the difficulties with this group is the conflation of language. Frères d'Orient literally means brothers of the East. Sometimes you'll read in English people saying the Rosicrucian brothers, the brothers of the East, the Frères d'Orient. That could mean this group in France. It could mean the Asiatic Brethren of Egypt, of Germany. It could mean the Golden Rosenkreuz. It could mean the Rosacrucismo d'Orient. It could mean a number of different things. So you really have to discover, key down who they're talking about when you're reading these histories. But this group, the Frères d'Orient, in its modern form, truly was established by Demetrius Plato Semelas. He was a Greek esotericist who was naturally gifted at a young age. He was said to have visions when he was younger. He was said to have well, I'll talk about some of that in a moment. Here's a quote from their first degree. To the spirit that is concerned with the external things, it says, quote, I am the unique God of heaven and earth, the sole and unique being which had no birth and which will have no death through old age. Sounds pretty cool. But to the ear of the mysterious mystic, this sacred symbol whispers a multitude, a host of truths. Quote, I am the monad through which everything gives birth and everything is born. I am the monad, nothing could exist before me, after me. The infinity of the worlds is governed by me. I am the almighty monad, the absolute monad. In me, everything is eternally multiplied, but I remain an inviolate monad, indivisible and unalterable. I am the monad that produces all the numbers. Every action is performed through me. Every number is born and multiplied through me to infinity. I am the absolute monad. So this organization is seeking to bring someone from an aspirant through discipleship to a master of the pillars, to being a master apostle, to being a healer, to being a master at the threshold of death, to eventually what they consider a true Rosacrucian master. Yes. Definitely some John D in there. One more quote from that their preliminary teachings. I am a form of the monad, generated from its desire. My form will have a beginning and an end, but my essence has always been eternal. I am the Word, created in flesh, but uncreated and always alive in the spirit. I have come on earth in order to prove the mystery of the monad to humans. I am man, God, Christ, and in me the Trinity is personalized. So they're dropping some big bombs there. Around that circle it says, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have pity upon me, a sinner. That is one of their main mottos. This organization was really still an outer veil for the higher mysteries we're about to get to in a moment. But one of their major publications was The Secret Tarot of the Frere d'Orient, published under a pseudonym, Soleil Ha, which was the magical motto, Soleil Ha Deon, of Demetrius Symbolos Plato. And on the right, that shows you an example of how they taught. They start with this very, very simple symbol of an X, which is a St. Andrew's cross, right? It's also the Greek chi, a symbol for Jesus. So you know what that means. Then they add, then they add a line down the center. Now we have an IX, Iesu Christi, Jesus Christ. Then you add a center bar, a horizontal bar, which becomes the secret star of the apocalypse. And that's a foreshadowing of the higher degrees of the Isia. Then they begin adding on this symbol, compound, and each grade you learn new meanings of what these symbols are, until eventually, in the end, the 12th symbol is meant to reveal to the initiate the truth of the nature of God, man, and the universe. Again, I have a new publication of this that, due to copyright implications, it's only being distributed privately. But if this is something you're interested in, the French tarot, which is very, very different from the English tarot that I honestly prefer, then hit me up and maybe we can figure out some ways to share some stuff. That is a picture of Symbolos. He was a giant in the occult scene. He claimed that in 1902, at the monastery of the prophet Elijah at Levadia on Mount Parnassus, to have discovered an ancient Templar manuscripts, inspiring him to revive the Templar tradition, which, according to these manuscripts, is, quote, the universal association of the unity of men under one God and one society. In 1909, he was initiated into the Frere d'Orient, or so to speak, or maybe, and then in 1923, he became master of that organization, which we just talked about. Again, we've already talked about the conflations within these orders between the Asiatic Brethren, den Ritter und Brüder St. Johann des Evangelisten aus Asien und Europe, which means the Brethren of St. John the Evangelist from Europe and Asia. This order has a similar name, Eques a Sancte Ioannes Evangelista, Eques a Sancte Ioannes Apostolica. So the Knights of the Holy Saints John the Evangelist, the Knights of the Holy Saints John the Apostle. As if we needed more orders calling themselves the Knights of St. John. But this order was revolutionary in the way that they introduced theurgy, as well as perhaps a bit of thaumaturgy. One more piece of history about this individual. He was so important that in 1911, when he returned to Cairo, he was initiated into Pappus's Order Martiniste, and he helped establish the Essene Lodge and to write the rituals, to rewrite the rituals of the second, third, and fourth degrees, which eventually became adopted by the entire order. So he was a highly influential individual. He also founded the Order of the Lily and the Eagle, Order du Lys et de l'Aigle, as well as some other things. And like a lot of these individuals, he eventually began teaching Christian sex magic, and things got a little crazy. But he did a lot of highly influential stuff that we still see today, whether we know or not. This organization taught through a series of 3 or 4 degrees, depending on how you count, depending on if you were tacking on another system at the end. But this organization has, since the 20th century, been considered to be the highest initiatic system of the West, at least of the French tradition. It infuses in its egregore the lineages of St. John the Evangelist and the Apostle. And through a 3-degree system, it pushes them from the Gospels of the Old Testament to the revelation of St. John and the Apocalypse. Getting back to that legend of him discovering these manuscripts, the legend depicts that he was in a monastery in Greece, went up a mountain, and found a beggar asking for alms. He gave the beggar a few coins and went inside to the empty monastery. And after a couple hours of meditating and not receiving any messages or passes or signs, he decided to leave. But he met the beggar again outside, who asked him if he had found what he came for, which Semolas said, "No, I did not." The beggar then told him to leave no stone unturned or untouched. So Semolas went back in and literally started to feel out the temple and the stones. He asked for guidance and meditation, and he saw a white light. And when he opened his eyes, this light focused on a single stone in a wall in that monastery. He moved that stone, and within it found a Templar ring and some parchments. He returned back outside, and the beggar was gone. It is from this mythological founding that he supposedly found the documents of these 3 degrees and the instruction to form a society of a unity of men and women under one God and one society, which claimed to be the true system of the Templars, which claimed to be directly connected to the Frere d'Orient, which claimed to be connected to the original Rosicrucian lineage. In modern organizations, this has been linked to all kinds of things, including the Cohen, the CBCS. And that's why its first degree is sometimes called Roi Secret, or Grand Professe 2. But properly, it is Squire of St. John, Knight of St. John, and Commander of St. John. And there may or may not be a 4th degree of Priest King united to Melchizedek. This organization taught through the use of its prayers, bringing the individual into personal communication with the 7 angels of the 7 churches of Asia, discovering the secret sigils and seals of those 7 churches in order to open the book of the 7 seals, which we talked about in the very, very beginning with the Golden Rosenkreuz, which we saw again in the strict observance, and we saw again in the 4th degree of the CBCS, or Rite Equisae Rectificae. So, whereas in the Masonic traditions, they keep that more as a theoretical idea, here's the book of the 7 seals, and they relay more of like a traditional biblical mythology. In organizations like this, you seek to make that a reality. And this does not mean that we're seeking to destroy the universe. It means the apocalypse that is seeking to happen here is an internal apocalypse, an apocalypse of gnosis, in which the old self is destroyed so that the new self, the new king, can rise, in which the old conceptions are destroyed so the new king can arise. And I do believe that we hold on to some of those principles in our current 18th degree of the Scottish Rite. If only in theory, at least some of the symbols are there. We're going to jump into the last major organization we're going to talk about today, which is the SRIA, and then its culmination in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and the Rosa Ruby at Ordo Crucis. The SRIA, Societas Rosicruciana in Anglia, or, yes, exactly. Or on the left, the SRICF, the sigil of the American branch, was founded by high-grade Freemasons of England, and was headed by individuals who were also masters of the Quater Coronati, the premier lodge of research for Freemasonry. Over there on the left, you have an image of William Wynne Westcott, WWW, the original WWW, in his regalia as, I think he was Grand Magus, right? I might have this wrong because I don't have any notes in front of me. I'm just doing this off the cuff. I think he was Grand Magus of the SRIA at the time. Quater Coronati was founded in 1888, I believe, or circa, and so was the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. The SRIA was founded because these high-grade Freemasons in England wanted to study the Hermetic, Kabbalistic, and magical traditions, and they were not getting that in the high-grade Masonry of the time. Sounds familiar. So they founded the SRIA, which used a 10-degree system like that of the Golden Rosenkreuz and was based on a Kabbalistic system. But after a few years, it still was not doing what they wanted to do. So those adepts went on and formed a co-ed order of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and the Rosae Ruby at Ordo Crucis. And that became a modern magical Masonic, a modern magical, alchemical, Kabbalistic, practical order that perpetuated the Rosicrucian mysteries. Well, I would say it was probably Mathers. And that's okay. Just like the mythologies of Demetrius Simolas, the mythologies of Robert Ambelin and Pasquale and Chevalier and Michael-Andrew Ramsey and Etienne Morin and all that. Like these histories are interesting. There's romantic histories. I don't think we should throw them out the window. We should see what they're trying to tell us as a symbol, but don't take them as fact. So I told you we're going to return to the vault, right? Let's return to the vault, and we're going to read excerpts from the original Fama, and we're going to see how it is that the Hermetic of the Golden Dawn is the only group that has actually truly manifested the vault to the Adepti, according to the actual Fama Fraternitatis. Yep. So they talk about they're coming to discover this vault, and that they discover a hidden door. And upon that door is written, Post CXX Annos Patebo. After 120 years, I will open. And there's the symbols of the four elements, the cherubim, Yud He Vav He, manifested through the four worlds, with the year of the Lord underneath it. Returning to quotations from the original Fama Fraternitatis, quote, In the following morning we opened the door, and there appeared to our sight a vault of 7 sides, every side 5 foot broad, and the height of 8 foot. Although the sun never shined in this vault, nevertheless it was enlightened with another sun, which had learned this from the sun, and was situated in the upper part, in the center of the siding. In the midst, instead of a tombstone, was a round altar covered with a plate of brass, and thereon this engraven. We'll get to there in a moment. So you see here the vault of 7 sides from the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn's inner order, the RR at AC. You see on those sides Kabbalistic symbols and diagrams, which we will explain further in a moment. You see in the center of the hall is a circular altar, underneath which is a coffin or a tomb, the pastos. Continuing on, this is on the left, that is the top of the central altar itself. On the right, that is a closer up picture of the interior of the vault. Upon that altar is written, ACRC, Hoc Universae Compendium Unius Mihi Sepulchrum Fixi. Probably pronounced that wrong, but sorry. I have made this sepulchre as a single compendium of the universe. And indeed, the Vault of the Adepti is meant to be and represent the entire universe in its totality. Through this one diagram, this one symbol, this one vault, is the entire universe explained and created. Obviously, this is the initiation into the 5 = 6 grade. So a student would have spent anywhere from 2 to 10 years studying and preparing their consciousness, their subconscious, to be impregnated with these symbols. So when you step into it, it all is so full with meaning, and everything clicks at once. Note as well that in the original Golden Dawn, the diagrams of the outer order were black and white. So when you come into this Technicolor room, especially back in the 1890s, this would really blow your mind, and all the colors would come to life, and everything would coalesce in one instant moment. And this is part of how they conferred enlightenment and the royal secret upon their individuals. Continuing on with that central altar on the left, round the first circular brim stood Jesus mihi omnia. Jesus is all things to me. In the middle were 4 figures enclosed in circles, whose circumscription was: the top, Nicoquam vacuum, the letter Yud, the cherubim of the lion. Nowhere, not at all, a void. 2, on the right, Lebus Jugum, or Legis Jugum, the yoke of the law. That is the first hay, cherubim of the... interesting. That's probably backwards. That probably should be this one right there. These two, the images are backwards. Whoops. So this should be the eagle, Scorpio. 3. This whole thing is fucked up, actually. Cool. Just discovered that this diagram is wrong. Well, that's awesome. Libertatis Evangeli, the liberty of the Gospels. That should be Vav. And then Dea Gloria Intacta, the undefiled glory of God. The final He. Yud He Vav He. This is all clear and bright. Also the 7th side and the 2 heptagons. Again, I guess we'll get to that in a moment. You have the 7 sides, a heptagon above, a heptagon below. So we kneeled down together and gave thanks to the soul-wise, soul-mighty, soul-eternal God. That sounds very similar to the opening prayer we use, right? Who hath taught us more than all men's wits could have found out. Praise be his holy name. The vault we parted in 3 parts. The upper part or siding, which is here, that is the upper part on the right. You shall understand no more at this time, but that it was divided according to the 7 sides, in a triangle which was in the bright center. But what therein is contained, you that are desirous of our society shall, God willing, behold the same with your own eyes. And that is all they're going to talk about it. So let's jump into this image just for a moment. So on the right, this is the ceiling of the vault. You see a heptagon, obviously, and starting here with Saturn, we follow the order of the tree of life, almost. Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Tiferet, and then something here shifts. In the live version of this call, I'm re-recording this because it didn't record well, this section. In the live version of this, someone claimed that this was a blind or this was an error on the HOGD, that they messed this up. But greatly honored Frater, VNP, and I explained, or attempted to explain to this individual, that this was in fact intentional. And that the reason why the pattern shifts is they're trying to, number one, you're always thinking multidimensionally, right? Number 2, they're trying to teach you a lesson here, a lesson about Dalet, about Venus, about the Empress. That Dalet truly is the door. Here is the door in the west where you would enter the vault of the Deptai. Venus is the door. Dalet is the door. This goes back to the Christian Rosenkreuz, the chemical wedding. This goes back to classical Kabbalah. And the reason, I was just discussing in a call yesterday with a brother who's confused about about the paths in the tree of life. And I was explaining that Dalet truly is the union. Oh, perfect. There we go. Dalet is the union between Hakma and Bina, and is the door, the womb, through which Tiferet, the Vav, is born. So another way you could view this is Yud being Hakma, fire, He, blue, being Bina, the mother, birthing Vav, the son. And this occurs through the union of Hakma and Bina, births the son. Anyways, so there's their 7 sides, your Sephirotic names, and then the center is the supernal triad itself, Keter, Hakma, and Bina, with the 22 letters of the Rose of Creation. Returning now to this section. Every side or wall is parted into 10 squares. What do you think that means? Every one with their several figures and sentences, as they are truly showed forth and set forth concentratum here in our book. So let's just stop here for a moment and remember that they said, actually, we'll return to that. Okay, we'll return to that. Let's finish up this section. The bottom again is parted in a triangle. We have an upward triangle above, a downward triangle below. So together they form the seal of Solomon, right? The Star of David, the Martinus Pantacle, the union of heaven and hell. Very interesting. Yeah. So here we have, let's read what they say. Parted in triangle, but because therein is described the power and rule of the inferior governors, we leave to manifest the same, for fear of the abuse by the evil and ungodly world. But those that are provided and stored with the heavenly antidote do without fear or hurt tread on and bruise the head of the old and evil serpent, which this our age is well fitted for. Every side or wall had a door or chest, wherein there lay diverse things, especially all our books. We'll get back to that in a moment. So we see in the left the image of Leviathan, the image of the dragon with many heads. And we see the clepotic triangle, the inverted triangle. But even therein is that rose cross of 49 petals. If I look up into heaven, all I see is thee, Lord. If I look down to hell, all I see is thee, Lord. Paraphrase, obviously. Every side or wall had for a door for a chest, wherein there lay diverse things, especially all of our books. Skipping ahead. Generally all was done to that end, that if it should happen, after many 100 years, the fraternity should come to nothing, they might, by this only vault, be restored again. So, within the vault is contained the entire universe, the entire secret of the universe. And through this only image, it can all be reconstituted. So taking a look at this diagram, this is one of the vault walls. This is the soul, the sun wall of the vault of the Depti. All walls are the same, except they are tinged with their own colors from their Sephiroth, from the planetary paths. Hence, soul is orange, as opposed to yellow. Let's break this down a little bit. We see in the center the tree of life. Keter, Hakma, Bina, Kesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzach, Hud, Yesod, Malkut. Saturn, Bina, Sol, Tiferet. We'll start from beginning. Saturn, Bina, Kesed, Jupiter, Gevurah, Mars, Tiferet, Sol, Netzach, Venus, Mercury, Hud, Yesod, Venus, Malkut. Let's break it down further. There's a clean one on the left, so you can see it. Jupiter wall. There's the tree of life on the right, just to clearly distinguish what's going on here. The very top, you have 4 cherubim. You have Yud, He, Shin, Vav, He. These are in the elemental colors. This gives you a clue as to where the vault exists. If their upper sphere is composed of these elemental colored cherubims in the great divine name Yeshua, where does this exist? I'll leave that for you to contemplate. You see up here in the supernals the formation of the elements, the prototypes. So you have the prototypes through the name here. You have the prototypes now becoming elemental specifically. You have the prototypes of the alchemical elements, salt, sulfur, and mercury in their appropriate colors, according to the Golden Dawn at least. Note that salt, sulfur, and mercury take on so many different forms depending on what author is talking. They're very malleable. The way that they use them in the Golden Dawn is very, very different from how they're used in the Elo Kohen, for example. But the way they use in the Golden Dawn is pretty much the standard Western esoteric version of them. There might be some slight differences here and there, though. Then we see, as we go down, we have the planets we've already talked about, the Sephiroth we talked about. Then we have the zodiac proper. And we see the cherubim again, but now in their zodiacal colors. The zodiac, fixed, cardinal, mutable. This zodiac is not the same as that. These are the actual constellations, whereas these are the primitive primordial forces represented by the name of Yeshua. Moving on. Now as yet we had not seen the dead body of our careful and wise father. We therefore removed the altar aside. There we lifted up a strong plate of brass, and found a fair and worthy body, whole and unconsumed, as the same as here living, lively counterfeited, with all the ornaments and attires. In his hand he held a parchment called T, Book T, which next to the Bible is our greatest treasure, which ought to be delivered to the censure of the world. At the end of this book stood the following eulogium. Granum pectori Jesu in situ, a seed planted in the heart of Jesus. At the end was written, Ex Deo nascemur, in Jesu morimur, per spiritum sanctum reviviscimus. On the left, that is an image that was on the top of the pastos, the lid of the pastos from the outside. Is an image of the adept making that great sacrifice. On the right, you have the image that is in the inside of the pastos on the lid. This is what you would see laying in the coffin looking up. And this is the great mystery. Continuing in the manuscript, concerning Minutum Mundum, we found, which is what the Golden Dawn called the Tree of Life, this diagram here, Minutum Mundum, the small world, the microcosm. We found it kept in another little altar, truly more finer than can be imagined by any understanding man, but we leave him undescribed, until we shall truly be answered upon this our true-hearted Fama. And so we have covered it again with the plates, set the altar thereon, made it secure, made it sure, with all our seals, besides the instruction and command of our Rota, Ator, Athor, Hathor, Athanor, Tero, Orat, Ora. There are come to cite some books, among which is contained M. One of the amazing things about the Golden Dawn is that they truly manifested the Rosicrucian manifestos. They truly manifested exactly what the Fama Fraternitatis was talking about. This is something that all those previous organizations we talked about didn't do exactly to the T the way that they did it. But also, so here's one of the last quotes from the Fama Fraternitatis. Quote, but also every Christian may know of what religion and belief we are. We confess to have knowledge, to have the knowledge of Jesus Christ. As the same now in these last days, and chiefly in Germany, most clear and pure is professed, and is nowadays cleansed and void of all swerving people, heretics, and false prophets. Now, that's obviously a comment about the Lutheran Reformation, Protestant Reformation. But hear that again. We confess to have the knowledge of Jesus Christ. They confess that through this Rosicrucian work, you will come to understand the true nature of Jesu Christi, of the Word made flesh. And as they say, quote, in the Fama, our philosophy also is not a new invention, but as Adam after his fall has received it, and as Moses and Solomon used it, blah, 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 blah. He gives this lineage, the true philosophy, the true theology, wherein Plato, Aristotle, Pythagoras, and others did hit the mark, and wherein Enoch, Abraham, Moses, and Solomon did excel, but especially wherewith that wonderful book, the Bible, agrees. They end with the last quote, sub umbra alarum tuarum Jehovah. Under the wings, under the shadow of the wings, the Lord.
Thank you very much for attending this talk. I hope that it has been beneficial. If you would like to hear more about these kinds of esoteric subjects, please follow the Order Martinis Souverain YouTube page, as well as our Facebook page. We have lectures almost every Friday night, and we have currently something like 35, 40 hours of YouTube videos up already. Thank you for your time and best wishes in your journey towards that golden Rosy Cross.